Welcome, building science friends, to Passive House Accelerator Live's Construction Tech Edition. I'm Shannon from Sanderson Sustainable and Source 2050, and I'm here along with my Passive House brothers, Sean, Mark, and Kevin, and we're going to put the fun in Passive House and high performance with a PH. So come for the geek, stay for the networking, turn on your camera, rename yourself with your location, open the chat, and you just might meet your new colleague, client, or employer right here today. So we hope to see you at the conferences coming up soon, along with today's special guest, Maureen Sanchez from RDH Building Science, talking about student residences in Passive House, scaling challenges and insights. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kevin. Kevin, over to you.
Hey, thanks, Shannon. I'm Kevin Brennan. I'm here in New York City. I operate Brennan Insulation and Air Tightness, and I'm excited for this session because I've met Marin a few years ago at a New York Passive House conference. We did some tours together, and I've been watching from afar during COVID of all the great work that she's been putting out there. And if I know my construction tech friends, we'll enjoy the technical, the technique, and the technology, and I'm excited. I think I saw a few videos about window blower door testing in high rises. Nothing gets my nerd up quite like that. But it's going to be a fun session. And please ask your technical questions in the chat. Put them out there. Ask the big questions. Why did you do that? What was your decision behind that? We want to learn faster and move faster than we're possible. We have to share more than anyone else. So I'll kick it off to Sean.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are sitting here enjoying the Passive House Accelerator Live Edition Construction Tech, where we have Maureen Sanchez, who is based in Toronto, but she seems to be everywhere with RDH's Passive House program, helping out the team there, making sure they dive in the details. And today, we've got a project like no other, where she has been heavily involved in ensuring that the fine details, so as Kevin said, yes, the techniques, the technology, and the technical will be discussed because this particular project is very, very impressive. So she is a bit of an accelerator alumni, because if you go back almost 3 years when it was actually the global Passive House happy hour, we brought her on to help kick things off. And so I think this is presentation number 3 or maybe even 4. We'll definitely put all the presentations that she's put with the accelerator into the notes so you can go back and look at them, because she gives a great presentation. And so that being said, let's put on the pressure, because she's going to show us some of the things that are cooking and going on at the amazing RDH projects, the Passive House projects that she's been involved in. So Maureen, please take the stage, and we're so grateful to have you here today.
Thank you, everybody. I'm so happy to see so many familiar faces, so it's great. And Sean, you're totally right. I think we've been presenting on these different projects for at least online over the last 4 years, and so I'm happy to say that this might be one of the last ones because we are getting there. Okay, let me just share my screen. Can I have a thumbs up that everything's compiling okay? Okay, sweet, let's roll. Okie doke. So yes, Maureen Sanchez, I lead our Passive House services at RDH Building Science. So I get to see what everything, like what is cooking everything for North America. And I also had the chance before that to practice in Europe. So that's been really helpful to, to grab all of this together and keep pushing the industry forward. Today, we've mentioned this already, but it's really looking back at the construction of like the first generation of North American Passive House student residences and what we have learned, over that course. We've been delivering Passive House for a long time. The community's, definitely getting there, and yet every single time there's always more and more to learn. So this is what I have in store for today. I might have been a little bit ambitious, but we'll see. More or less looking at a quick project overview, but then starting just before construction starts, then looking at submittal, and then really diving in the construction part with, challenges, successes, air tightness testing, grabbing all the as-built conditions back into our energy models and then summarizing all of this into a few slides, if that's even possible. So, project overview. I'm sure the community has seen these before. I just want to make sure that whoever hasn't seen them, you can follow us fairly well, but these are the nice pics, okay, before we dive into the technical. The University of British Columbia, Okanagan, so we call it UBCO. That's the first one we completed with about 220 beds in BC, and it's been occupied since 2020, so that's pretty exciting. The next one, we ramped up the difficulties. The University of Victoria, which consists of 2 buildings. You're seeing building 1 on the screen, and the key things are that you have just shy of 800 beds in these 2 buildings. Building 1 has been occupied since last September, and building 2 occupancy's just been granted over the summer, so we're getting the next bunch of students in, so that's super exciting. And yeah, there's a big commercial kitchen in there. You already know that. Today we won't talk too much about kitchens. The final one, again, slightly different, but not necessarily any easier, is the University of Toronto Scarborough. So we're moving back to Ontario this time. And again, a bit shy of 800 beds, but now all gathered into one building. And we have again received occupancy as literally a couple of weeks ago, and the students are moving in as we speak. So again, super exciting to see all these projects finally, you know, getting through the finish line, almost finish line, as we'll see. Okay, deep dive into just before we start construction, just to make sure that we've set everything into place to set up our team for success. So we all know that it is no small task to design such buildings as passive house buildings, and achieving that design stage review is, again, another big milestone. I know we have our certifier on the line, so shout out to PHI as well, and Roberto, representing PHI for all the work that has been done during design. That being said, it is, again, no small task to get it through to construction. So how do we set up our teams? The first thing is, before we even start site, making sure we are so clear in the documentation that we need. And the way we do it at RDH is more or less using what we call a passive house construction verification checklist, which is literally a translation of the entire energy model that is not necessarily digestible by everybody into a clear list of performance requirements. So you got a quick snapshot in there, but think that this document has like 7, 8, 9 tabs divided by different categories, so that upfront we can be very clear with what we're going to need from each trade to get to the finish line. The second thing is definitely a passive house construction kickoff meeting, just not a normal one. In that one, we take the time to really clarify all our expectations. Yes, of course, we talk about other things, but the 2 things I really want to highlight are, yes, you've seen the construction documentation requirements, which you have that snapshot on the left and examples on the right, as well as, you know, the air tightness testing and the air boss role, right? These are incredibly important, if not fundamental, roles that we need on site. And if these are not set up from the start, then we're just making our life extremely complicated. So yes, I'm talking from, you know, a best case scenario, but it's always good to keep in mind where we would be if it was a perfect world, and then see if we can work, you know, as close to that target as possible, knowing that your construction phase will always throw some, you know, unexpected surprises your way. And what we've seen through some of the start of construction difficulties through the different projects that I've mentioned have been, for some reasons or others, we have had construction start before the IFC. So issued for construction drawings are issued. So you can see that that's not how I would recommend to do this. So definitely try before. Same thing, which is a little bit more understandable, as the energy model most of the time lags a little bit behind the drawings and spec submissions, but definitely trying to have that design stage review and confirmation from the certifier, which we call the design stage assurance letter, before the construction starts, because then your passive house design is set. Making sure that we switch from reactive to proactive after the passive house construction kickoff meeting, because there's a lot of things to be added to the processes and you want to get onto that as soon as possible. Any late start has been proven to be a bit difficult. And then that lack of familiarity with the new roles. It's not because we are not familiar that we cannot embed these roles and really recognize them from the start. And the final portion is, again, I'm kind of slightly diverging from the technology in here, but the staff retention is absolutely crucial to every one of these projects as well, right? The more you're going to have turnaround, be it through the design team, the GC team, the trades and sub trades, the more difficult it's going to be. Okay, so that was just highlighting what we faced at a higher level before giving you a bit of a flavor through what we've seen on these different projects. Okay, submittals. Submittals are always fun-ish. And when you're dealing with passive house, I guess we're moving all of that to the next level. Like, we're moving all the requirements, all the expectations to the next level. And again, it takes a bit of time, a bit of stepping back, a bit of additional clarity and intention to set the entire team, both on the design side and construction and trade side, for success. So, Kevin, no pun intended, but still a bit, we need an airtight submittal process. So what does that mean? We need such a robust and reliable, process that we, it changes a few things. And the things that it will change is what I'm sharing on this screen. Definitely, we need an earlier involvement, because we need more details, we need more back and forth, we need to take care of everything. So we need that earlier involvement, which might not be easy when the GCs and GC team and sub trades might be quite far from installing yet. So definitely something to touch on. It will take longer to go through them and close them out. And then that retention, because when you're talking about super large, complicated projects where, submittal process can be anywhere up to a year and a half, and that's just the submittal, you then need to move on to installation. You definitely need to find ways to have as much staff retention on in all parties as you can to help, your whole installation process. So what do we mean with an airtight submittal process? So we have a lot more scrutiny, and we have to resolve everything. Anything you're going to leave for later is going to come back hurting you. So what do I mean by that? This is the, in a way, RDH way that we've used on these particular projects to set up us for success. And you can see that as much as you have the process where the GC submits, the GC makes sure that we have clear expectations, and this gets disseminated to the trades. The trades look at, provide the first submittal with clear demonstration that they're going to meet the requirement. It goes back to the GC and the architect to confirm, yes, we're meeting what we want, therefore let's move on to every consultant, before consolidating all the comments and sharing it back with the trades. You can see that process, you need to set very clear expectations from the start, which goes through clear performance requirements. So that's what we were talking about with that passive house construction verification checklist. If the trades don't know what they're trying to meet, then your submittal is not going to be, meeting what you want it to meet. So we, as design teams, need to do a lot of work through that knowledge transfer and make sure that we can give our trades the knowledge they need to then send us compliant information. You see in orange that we can go in a loop if ever we need, to resubmit or add additional information, and then making sure we're closing everything. So that sounds pretty straightforward in practice. However, all the red is starting to show us how much we're getting hurt through things not quite going right. If you start with unclear expectations, definitely, that's not going to go well. Incomplete submittals are also, probably, I don't know, reason number one for doing more back and forth. And then the open submittals, because not all of them get closed, more or less, these unclosed submittals transform from like a little mini gremlins to like gigantic monsters on site. And it's always gonna like hurt you more later. So you really want to do everything you can up front. What do I mean by that? So a few examples where we stated the goals and then we're sharing the reality of site. Do we want full and complete submittals? Yes. And complete means not only what we're supposed to install, but as we're talking high performance buildings, we also need all the test data and thermal modeling that is behind that demonstration of the high performance products that we're procuring. We want all the details, especially the ones where there might be a thermal bridge, to be aligned with what is captured in the energy model and what is captured into any drawing set, right? Architectural mainly, but a few others. We do want coordinated shop drawings, that goes without saying, and we want to close all of this early. Well, these are the goals. What happens in reality? We want full and complete submittals, and yet, even with extremely good submittals, you're seeing some of the submittals right now for punch windows on some of these projects. We've really experienced trades, and yet, we received some frame performance, but not the tricky ones that are, the extra tricky conditions that are hidden a bit here and there. We're getting some of the IGU information, but yet we're missing some of the test data to really confirm that we're meeting the spec. And all type of other informations like, secondary seals and other accessories, which, as much as they sound smaller than the big rocks, these little pieces of gravel could definitely have a gigantic impact on how your building is performing and what's its lifetime, right? So definitely it takes a lot of extra work to go through that and get to a complete submittal. So again, if we can list clearly what we want, we win. From bridging details aligned between the, with the model and architectural, again, really good submittals, and yet version number 1 has no window over insulation, whereas all our drawing sets has window over insulation. Okay, so better communication hopefully can bridge this gap and avoid additional back and forth, because that's costly to everybody. Coordinated shop drawings, of course. Yet I'm showing you on the screen again on a different projects. Left is the cladding submittal scope, so think vertical, and right is the roofing scope, which thinks, horizontal. And yet, when you look at the interface, they don't talk to each other. So the roof submittal said, well, actually, I don't even know I have external insulation, so I'm not even going to cap the damn thing, And it's not such a big deal, but it, again, takes extra care to make sure this gets coordinated really well and addressed earlier, rather than showing up to site and being like, hang on, that's not what is on the drawings, right? And then finalize them, like do all these rounds, go back and forth as many times as you need, but finalize them early. Again, a little bit of a saga story. You might need popcorn for that one, but the curtain wall submission for one of his projects was a bit demanding, where we actually started in March 2021 with the first submission, lots of information, great, but some missing. That's cool. April 2021, we received more with particular additional performance installation. Great, I'm, a happy girl. Then December, so there's quite a bit of lag, and we're receiving yet another submission, and it's starting to highlight some of the changes in changes in some of the products, particularly the IGU spacer. So, okay, we start flagging it, but what happens at the same time? Well, delivery has started and things are already on site. So, you can see that the sequencing starts not quite aligning. It keeps going. February, we start seeing some of these installation, right? Installation of a kernel wall going up. And yet later February, we're still discussing details as to how to install that. So you can see that that doesn't really work. And then March, now that everything is installed, we are receiving final technical information that was missing that does not align with the model assumptions. So we now have to capture that into the final as-built energy model. So you can see that as much as we have good intentions, you always have to keep thinking further and further and be so proactive, so on the ball to make everybody's life easier. Because again, I've done Passive House for long enough. I'm one of the old timers in there, and there's an easy way and there's a hard way. And let me tell you, the easy way is always way better. No question there. Okay, moving on a bit more with other construction challenges and successes that we've seen. Again, construction, it's always good to have a plan, and yet that not everything will ever get, will ever go according to plan. So showing you what we have to work with and how you can, work with it and massage it through the process that you have and the energy model that needs to capture all this. Okay, insulation stick pins, right? We're working most of the time with a backup wall construction, which can be, CLT, metal steel studs, or even timber frame in some cases. And then, sheathing, air and water barrier, and then a lot of external insulation with thermally broken clips to support the external cladding of your choice, right? And so sometimes we get told no need for, everybody takes into account all the cladding attachment clips. But then when you zoom in a little bit more, as we have to do with Passive House, you start seeing stick pins. Some people tell you, nope, no need for stick pins. Insulation is going to stay into place through the clips and through the rails and whatever. And others come back saying, hey, I know we said we were not going to install any or very few, but technically I've just read on the technical cut sheet that it's 5 per board. So I'm going to go crazy and have them everywhere. That impacts your model. So on most of these projects, we've had a lot of back and forth, and most construction teams and cladding trades have settled on 2 stick pins per board, right? And you might not see it really, really well on the screen, but if you really zoom in, you can see the subdivisions of your boards, and most of them demonstrate 2 stick pin per board, which is not much, but when you don't have much margin to play with, you definitely want to pay attention to all of that. Parapet, oh, that old friend. Well, these 2 submittals, as you can see, didn't get resolved, and you can see that the tie-in of the membranes together didn't really tie in. So again, that was one of the little gremlins turning into a big monster. We dealt with that, took a bit of extra time, but we can work with that. Curtain wall glass carriers. You remember some of the changes we've seen there? We saw very late. One of them was, so we had issues with the spacer as well, but we also discovered much later that we had issues with the glass carriers. The 2 plates that you would put under each IGU into your fixed curtain wall. And the original intent was definitely to work with the system we were working with as described into passive house certificate, but again, the passive house certificate is not gospel, okay? You want to double check what you're buying, and in that case, the information wasn't shared. We kept asking for it, but by the time it was delivered, we realized that we didn't have, as mentioned here, non-metallic glass carriers with screws. We had fully metallic glass carriers that are more of a thermal bridge. So again, detrimental impact onto our model. I'm gonna go a bit faster on the other ones. Dog houses, I don't have, I'm gonna admit, after doing this quite a few times, I'm not particularly fond of dog houses. They're not easy. Again, submittals don't get resolved. You have a drawing on the left with the roof insulation trying to stay roughly flat. You have the detail on the right where you're kind of carving, following the doghouse perimeter for your insulation. And these didn't get quite resolved. You can see the number of comments on the screen. No need to read them all. And you can see that when these are not resolved, you don't necessarily get the best detail on site. So you might not have seen some before, but you can imagine that despite all the detailing that we want, the photos that we're sharing with you is not exactly what we deemed passive house performance. We know the detail is not easy, right? We didn't have a full detail. The submittals didn't get closed in, and that the lid of the mechanical doghouse had to be removable. So again, you don't get to seal it once and seal it well and be done. You need to be able to go back and forth, which means, you know, it gets a little bit trickier. But again, you can imagine that during the airtightness test, we were not particularly impressed with the airtightness of that detail, because you know what we're looking for. Crew changes. I'm not going to go into too much details, but when, you know, when your cladding attachment is well fixed, but has somewhere around 15 to 20 holes, you know, next to each other before it gets fixed, that means you're having a new crew on site, because these photos are dated over, like, you know, the kind of last year, year and a half, whereas construction's been going for, you know, a couple of years already. Same thing with, you know, you can see, sorry, I've lost my mouse. Where is it? Wait, getting it back. Here we go. Okay, you see like some of the wiring penetrations that are, you know, and tie-ups that are tie-ins that are not really well detailed, or the fact that your temporary cable in the right picture gets actually covered by your poorly installed air and water barrier, right? You can tell without even talking to a GC. So did we have a new crew today? Because I am not seeing what I've been used to seeing over the last, you know, 20 site visits on site. Same thing with the post-installed penetrations as well. When you have a really good air barrier to be there, and yet, you know, the trades that come maybe later on in the process, like electrical trades, where I would say the passive house induction became more relaxed, right? We inducted most trades from the very beginning with a lot of training and a lot of dedication. And the more the process, like the more the project goes through time, the more we become relaxed because we think everybody's up to date. We need to make sure that the new, you know, any staff joining us later on gets to receive the same education, because if not, it shows, and then again, it takes a bit more time. Okay, diving into airtightness testing. And again, some of the things where we think we're ready, and yet, you know, what journey are we going through? Airtightness testing. Airtightness, it's all about, and airtightness testing is all about risk management. Why is that? The only thing you get actually judged on is that big green box at the end. When the building is complete and you get no opportunity to change anything whatsoever, what do you get? And do you are you under the limit, or are you above the limit, which could still give you a really good building, but means certification is taken away from you because you are above the line that is clearly defined in the set. So what do we do for risk management? every other type of testing and QA/QC is all about how much risk we want to take together as a team. So on these larger projects, we're not, I'm sure we think that we're taking enough risks in other places, so we're not too keen into taking so much risk on the airtightness performance portion. And so you can see that we did a lot of I'm not going to call it admin, but more preparation and site review through the airtightness testing plan very early, as well as a lot of QA/QC on site, like literally as long as airtightness, like any element of the airtightness layer is being installed, then we're going to show up to site and control it, as well as having a really good relationship with the GC to get additional pictures in between site visits. But I want to talk about testing today. And here is all the extra testing that we did on the projects that I mentioned at the start. Mock-up testing wherever feasible. We didn't get to do that on every project, but we did some. Then, particularly important, the first window installed. So we are doing a lot of qualitative testing, right? Crunch windows and curtain walls, same thing, doing airtightness testing, water testing, and all kinds of things to make sure that before you go ahead and install, what's the number of that? Probably close to 2,000 IGUs on each of these projects. You just want to make sure that the first one works, and you're going to work at it until you get it to work before you do all the others, right? So we do this and we repeat as needed until we're satisfied. So this one takes a bit longer than usual, but has been a great success on site to get us to a good shape and good results. Then most larger projects don't have the luxury of doing mid-construction whole building test, though we've managed to fit in a few on these larger projects because of sequencing and COVID delays and whatever, but we definitely do guarded test of of one level or a certain space or zone in the building before, if we can, doing a mid-construction whole building airtightness test, which is the first time we're looking at the actual figure we're going to be judged on before the final one. So here are a few pics of the journey. Here is when we start qualitative window or airtightness testing on the punch window this time. And you should be able to see some smoke getting out of here and escaping. So this is when the chamber is pressurized and we are putting smoke on the inside and just simply checking on the outside. Are we getting a lot of smoke, or are we getting a little bit of smoke, or are we getting no smoke at all? Before we start going back at it and saying, so where is it coming from? What's the source of it, and how do we fix it? And honestly, there's been so many different reasons on every single one of these projects, but all these tests have been more than useful. I cannot highlight it, enough. Then, once you figure it out and you've done it several times before you're happy, this is when you start going with the rest of the installation, as you're seeing on the screen. And so we've done guarded tests. They went well. Super encouraging to have your standard floor doing extremely well, because you want all the typical stuff to do very well and keep the rest of the budget for all the tricky items like the doghouse and entrance doors and whatnot. You want to go do your mid-construction whole building airtightness test if you can. We had the luxury at UTSC to do that. Amazing results, 0.25 air changes per hour at 50 Pascal with the other metrics depending on what you want to relate to. Sure, it's pretty good. It's also a big building, and we're still missing, several items, right? So you can see in the picture, I'm just going to go back, that the hoist area is not complete. There's a lot of dampers and other things that are not complete. So always take these results with a pinch of salt, okay? And know that it might get higher depending on what still needs to be closed. Like this time we had sealed dampers and mechanical, which are not allowed to be sealed, but they were incomplete yet, so we couldn't leave them in closed position to test. other side note, I know it sounds pretty obvious, but don't test in a blizzard. We tested this like the second week of January when Toronto was like literally in the middle of a snowstorm, and just don't do that. Life is complicated enough not to do that. So we've learned our lesson. I don't think we're ever doing this again. And then the final whole building air tightness test, which happened earlier in August, which was way nicer if you can have your schedule aligned with that. You can see the like different doors that we have to put in different locations to pressurize and depressurize absolutely everything. So that middle door was at the bottom in the kernel wall. We have other mechanical spaces and stuff that don't always connect to everything. And then we had some doors on the first floor, again, to help with making sure the pressure is, equal, not identical, but similar enough, close enough throughout all the floors to pressurize and depressurize that large building. And you can see, as predicted, that these results are great. 0.36 air changes per hour at 50 Pascal for a GC doing first time passive house and first time gigantic building, great. Yet it's never as good as what the mid-construction tests show you, because you are still missing some of these items. So make sure you keep some extra buffer in there. Additional things that we've learned, it sounds so simple, and yet look at the photo on the left, right? You remember that for air tightness testing, any ventilation ducting that works continuously, i.e. 24/7, gets to be sealed. And everything that does not work continuously doesn't get sealed, because we have to simply rely on their performance in closed condition. So when you have extra complicated buildings, they needed little people like me, thinner, probably thinner and smaller than most, contractors on site, to literally go into a gigantic plenum from where I took the photo to make sure that we would be allowed to leave the plenum louver, which is on the right, closed but not sealed, whereas we were able to seal the intake of AHU, I think 7 in this case, right? So you can see that understanding what can be sealed versus what has to be left closed without human interaction of additional sealing is super important. And when your building becomes incredibly complex, please don't underestimate the prep time, desk-based and as well on site. And this also goes to the photo on the right, which you're gonna laugh, but again, we're all learning. There's nothing stupid here. Please don't put this is a kitchen exhaust louver. It's working continuously, therefore we get the opportunity to seal it. That's fine, but don't tape it to a non-stick surface, because guess what? It doesn't work. So I have a test. It's 9 p.m. already, and I literally need to give that hood alone 5 big guys to keep taping more and more and more as this test goes, because I have all my tapes like moving away slowly, because guess what? The non-stick surface works like a charm, right? So here you go, things I never thought I'd learned, but I learned it. So I won't make that mistake next time. Okay, so all the duct sealing that you do, like everything you're allowed to actually seal, so human intervention to make it airtight, just double check it can withstand the conditions that you're working with. Because don't get me wrong, the taping looked stellar when we showed up on site before pressurizing or depressurizing. The team is literally a team that handles asbestos, right? So the taping was like just sweet. But when you start putting the fan and ramping stuff up, things went a bit sideways, and it took us a while to figure it out. Okay, can tell you more about this later. And I just wanted to highlight again, I'm showing you that journey, that example for one project, but it's to me, it was also something I didn't realize until stepping back and looking at these last 6 years of design and construction for these projects. Airtightness always gets used as either a V measure during design and or a construction lever, okay? Because you can see that out of the 4 buildings that we've worked with, everybody always started at 0.6. And yet it goes down to 0.4 when you start needing to value engineer. Why? You're already paying for all your air tightness layer and whatnot. So, you know, you're not paying for extra material and normally no extra workmanship. So you start seeing some of the V being triggered at design stage and potentially maintained, or triggered later during construction when you're like, oops, things are not quite going right. I'm going to have to do better somewhere else. And it gets triggered again. And no matter what, I have just a few more slides to go through, and you're going to see that every single one of these projects actually achieved better than their target, which is great. That's what we need for certification. But it's not just good and the bonus stayed there. We had to use that bonus somewhere else. So air tightness is a really big lever that you want to pay really, a lot of attention to. Okay, final section, just the energy modeler in me has to talk about the model a tiny bit. So we know the passive house metrics. We know they're stringent. There's, straight, absolute, holistic, non-prescriptive, fine. But they're also based on delivery. What does that mean? It means that all your construction changes, your final air tightness test, and your commissioned ventilation flow rates have to be placed back into the model, and the model still needs to compile. Let me put this in really clear terms. This is what we're seeing. We just talked about air tightness, so you're going to see that the air tightness is going to help you get additional margin again. That's the black arrow. But any construction, well, not any, but let me say, at least from my experience, most construction changes will guide you the other way, as well as commissioning, like ventilation commissioning, which is not an exact science. So we try our best, but it's not going to land exactly where your energy modeler keeps telling you it's going to land, okay? And so it's that reminder that, yes, you need to do really great for the air tightness test and pass that black and white criteria, but you also need to have all your model compiled together, be it on your space heating demand, space cooling, or your PER. Again, not too much to to dwell onto that, but I'm just sharing that before we started having results about our final air tightness test and final commissioning, we started doing a lot of sensitivity analysis on these variables to say, how is that moving the model? Where are we going? Are we going like really far and we're breaking everything? Or how do we make it like still move, but move within the box that we're allowed? And what you're seeing is on one of the projects, the sensitivity on the PER, which was the tightest criteria we're up against on the air tightness performance of a building, as well as on the ventilation commission, okay? And you can see that the sweet spot that we found to more or less balance these options is that if we move from 0.6 to 0.4, we can then afford plus 5% on the total flow rates to keep us where we want to be. So sensitivity analysis, have that in mind and understand how you're going to approach it. Ventilation commissioning, again, we've already talked about this, but as much as we all know, remember it's a bottom-up approach. You still have to give every single room internally what they need before you start checking how it goes at the top. Because we've had other teams telling us the top's working well. And then I go down and I'm like, yeah, but you're not giving what you're supposed to give to these rooms. So bottom-up approach. What is the information required? Guess what? You know we're going to ask for more than what we're normally asked. What mode is your ERV in, or HRV, right? Because when you start having complex buildings that start fluctuating and modulating based on all kinds of sensors, it's not super straightforward when I say, I need the commissioning report, right, of that thing. What do you mean? How? When? Don't underestimate the time commitment. And then, as most people rush for occupancy and want to leave a bit of commissioning later on, access gets really hard, okay? So, side note, UVic Building 1 has been occupied for a year, and we keep going back in there every holiday because we're missing some information. So no, we're not yet certified. We're so close to the end, but access gets really difficult. So yes, it's a roller coaster. I don't know if you need helmets, if you need a drink, whatever you need, but like, you know, this is what we're going through. Again, quick highlight on a project. The design stage review gets us at 130.9 out of 130 out of 132 target. We blow all of that into the construction changes for X, Y, or Z reasons, right? Then the final whole building airtightness test give us a margin. So we're like, yay, okay, we go back down to 131.2. And then we start receiving some of the ventilation, and we're already back at 131.7. And I'm holding my breath. I'm trying, you know, not to hold it for too long, but this is exactly where we are. So remember that the more construction moves forward, the fewer construction levers you're going to be. And you still need to manage as a team, it's a team effort, your energy budget that is set for every single one of your criteria. So trying to digest 3 years-ish of construction into a couple of slides. You guys already know all of this, okay? We know that Passive House can be delivered successfully, and it's just more attention to detail. Clarity of construction document, managing your energy budget, attention to detail, more QA/QC, processes everywhere, which is required for Passive House, but help the entire building no matter what, and recognizing your air boss and Passive House site super, right? But if I dig a little bit deeper, what do? The two key things is always being proactive. You always have to get ahead of things. And literally most items that I shared today, what is it? Communication, communication, communication. Not quite location, 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 but almost the same, right? And if we do better, speak the same language, be very clear on expectations, and I guess nice to each other, right? Because being clear is being nice. Then you get to meet all these requirements under, which is, do you understand your project requirements? And did we do that knowledge transfer to the trades, right? So that they know what to submit in submittals, they know what to aim for, they know how to install it. And then you get that knowledge retention, different tactics, I won't go in there, and then recognizing these new roles from the beginning. The final thing where I step back and trying to look back at our energy team and what we do, which is, yes, there's a lot of techniques and technologies and other things, but on the soft skill side, you need to get the team to buy that mindset shift, because you need a so much deeper attention to detail than what everybody's used to doing. Your role is how I'm feeling, you know. I don't know how you call this in English, but you know when you run the races with like all these obstacles, like all the hurdles, and I feel like I'm running 1 meter ahead of everybody, and I'm just putting it down so that people can run faster, right? Like that's literally our job, to remove the obstacles that are ahead. A proactive approach to energy budget management. Guess what? It's not rocket science. We always do that with the financial budget. Just time to step up, do the same with energy budgets. And then it's good to have a ton of Passive House knowledge, but don't underestimate the fact that you need an experienced team from the Passive House side, but also from the industry standard side. Because when you start dealing with such large and complex projects, you need to know where you're starting from to see all these pitfalls. It's still construction, and half of it is never going to go according to plan, no matter how much we plan, okay? So here are the key takeaways to actually give you a such smoother journey than the ones we've had up to here, and show you that it's not rocket science to take Passive House to larger, more complex buildings, okay? We can do this, and here are the tools. Okay, thank you for bearing with me and my other excitement with all these lessons learned about everything.
How about a round of applause, everyone? That was incredible. Well done.
And
Fantastic,
Jump.
Maureen. That was a really great presentation. We really appreciate all of the information and the lessons learned that you shared. I know a lot of questions came in during the chat, and we're going
Okay.
to get into those in just a minute. Sean, over to you.
Yeah, amazing stuff. And before we kind of take it a bit of deeper dive, we're going to head over to sponsors and then events, and then we'll dive into questions. So
Hi, I'd like to give a big thank you to the fine organizations that make our work at Passive House Accelerator possible. First, a big shout out to our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. Thank you, too, to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Baxt Ingwe Architects, Glavel, Minutair, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, Partel, Rockwell North America, Stocorp, and Zola Windows. And thank you to our champion sponsors, Bewiso, Icon Windows and Doors, Intelligent Membranes, Proseco, and Source 2050. And thank you to our patron sponsors, Brennan, Coltraco Ultrasonics, Euroline Windows, Holstrom System, Inotech Windows and Doors, Lamelux, Owens Corning, RDH Building Science, Sanderson Sustainable Design, and US Engineered Wood T-Stud. Thank you, sponsors.
excellent. Thanks, Kim. And we'll dump into the questions shortly. So we got 5 minutes before the top of the hour. So we're going to kind of roll with 5 minutes left of questions and then the final 15. And so we'll keep Maureen as long as we can. But if you do need to jump off, we do appreciate you showing up today. Very insightful discussion that Maureen put in here. So if you're new to Passive House, just remember the kind of ensure that your team is dedicated and set up for the troubles and tribulations of the Passive House program. And if you ever need a refresher, just get your team to watch this video and make sure that they are on board to ensure you're successful throughout the entire process. So I just love the unclear performance expectations. I see that time and time again where the construction management team is maybe a bit egotistical about their approach and don't realize that they're going to need their specialists to set them up for success. So let's dive into questions. Shannon, I know you've been managing the queue, so we'll see who's into it. But Maureen, so grateful for having you here. And at the same time, congrats that you are bringing another Passive House enthusiast into the world. And we know you'll have to take some time off to take on being a mom. But we are so grateful for your expertise over the years and all that you do. And again, another amazing presentation. We're so lucky to have you.
Happy to share. Okay.
Well said, well said. The first question that we're going to have before we kick off into that after hour is one that I had too from Josh Van Wyck. Josh, unmute.
Sure. Hey, Maureen, great presentation.
Hey.
It's really awesome to see what you guys have been doing. Just was curious if you can talk a little bit about the submittals and how you budget both time and fee for reviewing those. Because as you said, it can be like 1.5 years of submittals and a lot of reviews and back and forth. And I'm just, yeah, how do you do it? Who do you have do it? Do you do it all? Do you get someone to help you? What's the secret to success?
Oh, okay. That's a loaded question, Josh. But of course, I don't expect anything else. Okay. In all fairness, you won't be able to put a fee or a time because it does not depend on you alone, right?
Yeah.
It depends on what gets submitted to you, both through the trades as to either meeting their the performance targets required or not, and the GC or architect, depending on which process you're going through, to review and make sure this, to not pass anything incomplete to you, right? That's the goal as consultants, right? We're not in charge of supervising the whole thing. So in all honesty, okay, easy answer to start with in terms of time and fees. We do it time and expense, because it's like you give us great stuff, it doesn't take us long, you pay for what you get, right? You keep sending us the same comments unaddressed on round 6, then I'm charging you for it, because I'm not having fun, you're not having fun, nobody's having fun. And, you know, that's not where, like, I don't operate this way. So where we've been extremely successful, and maybe that's my kind of soft skill side, is that we create good templates, good memos to have that knowledge transfer to the team. Because if you get to give the trades team or passive house models, going to look at us and be like, really, Marine, like, what do you want me to do with this? Okay, I'm not coming to site and dumping everything in front of you for you to build the building when you don't know how, right? And so it takes a while, and it's so much upfront time, dedication, and education, and discussions to make sure everybody's aligned. But when we do that through describing the process, setting clear expectations, this is what we expect when we receive a submittal. Here is the process that we would like to go through. Do we get approval from the entire team to follow that process? Here is the passive house construction verification checklist, which lists every single material that we want to check the thermal conductivity of, and every single assembly I need proof of, and every single thermal bridge, mechanical equipment, electrical equipment. It takes time, but I want to be very clear that it's on us as the design community that if we don't do the knowledge transfer, we are not setting up the construction and the trades for success. So we have to hold our part, and once we've done that, then it's on them.
That's a great answer. Thanks, Maureen.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that is a really great answer, Maureen. And I think that your soft side is fantastic. Those soft skills of being really, really nice, but dominating with that kindness and making sure that the team understands what those expectations are and making them raise that level and doing the relay race, running ahead and handing that baton off just in the nick of time, right? But that ability to communicate and be that agile is admirable. And this presentation is going to help a whole lot of people on all sides of this process. So what do you think, Sean? I think it is just about that time.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're at the top of the hour, so if people do need to go, again, we appreciate you showing up every week, and hopefully we'll see you via Denver tomorrow with the Passos Network's conference kicking off. And of course, we've got our good friend Kevin that kicks off the Passive House 101 series on, of course, it's Kevin's specialty, insulation. So yeah, I'll let you carry on with questions, Shannon. But yeah, if everyone needs to, if you do need to leave, enjoy your day, but stick around because there's a few more questions in the queue.
And I'm sticking around, so let's roll, Shannon.
Thank you. Yes, next question is from Ilana Beresford. Ilana? Am I saying your name right? Would you like to unmute? Looks like they may have left the building. So let me see if I can pull up Ilana's question. It was, why were Q50 and Q75 reviewed in Toronto? Why not Q50 only?
Oh, and 50, I think she means. Okay, that's all fine. More or less, these are two different ways, two different metrics to talk about air tightness. Passive House talks about air tightness in air changes per hour, but that is a slightly skewed metric because the bigger your building gets, the easier it gets, okay? It's still not easy, but it gets easier. And the air permeability, which is what we call Q, and Q50 at 50 Pascal, Q75 at 75 Pascal, is a more like-for-like approach to comparing the air leakage or air tightness performance of the building. And so, for example, the Toronto Green Standard, Washington State, BC, like there's other metrics that are out there in air permeability units. So I'm just showing it on the screen. It has, like, these numbers don't get judged on for Passive House, but it gives you a like-for-like comparison with other buildings that we're trying to do. So for example, you saw that all our results were like really, really low. Sorry, let me just get back to the figures. Q50, Q75, we were in between the 0.2 to 0.4 liters per second per square meter at 50 or 75 Pascal. The City of Toronto recommendation is a big 2, right? So you can see how much better we were with a regulation that is at the moment only a recommendation before it will make its way into code, okay? So that's just for a like comparison, that's all.
Thanks, Maureen. And I think Ben Station wants to know if you're taking on apprentices. That was a nice comment in the chat.
We are always growing our team. So again, RDH website, go to careers, go check what is over there. But we are always happy to talk to everybody, especially in the Passive House community. So don't be shy.
Perfect. Great advice. All right. I'm going to hand it back to Josh again. Josh, you had a follow-up question.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Shannon. I guess, hey, Maureen, it's me again. Just a quick question. You talked about energy budgets at different stages, and I really liked how you put that. And this is a challenge that I struggle with, especially, when your projects are going on for 4 or 5 years, from design to completion. And that sort of underlying stress that you talked about how do you manage when you're just like 0.5% away from your maximum, right? So do you
0.05 sometimes?
Well, yeah, exactly. 0.05. Yeah. Like very close or just a little bit over, 15.48, where you don't want to be. So how do you internally set sort of a goal for where you want to be at the end of those first design stage reviews and then have that conversation with the client? Like we have clients who say, okay, we don't want any buffer. We don't have any budget for buffer. But my experience is it costs them more in construction when they don't have that buffer. So I'm curious at what you guys are sort of internally doing. And if other folks have experience, it'd be great to hear what people are setting. Because I think not going into construction without a buffer, even with your airtightness, if that's the buffer, it still becomes stressful for everyone, and you end up making changes that aren't cost effective, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. So Josh, thank you for bringing up that point as well. In all honesty, this is how I would describe going into construction with no buffer is literally death by 1,000 cuts. Pending a little surprise if your airtightness goes well later, but it is literally death by 1,000 cuts. So don't do that. Yes, we always carry a margin at every stage of the design, at every stage of the project. Of course, that margin reduces the more accuracy we have on the building, right? The more accuracy we have pre-design, and then the more accuracy we have pre-construction as, the construction is ongoing and we're losing some of our levers that we've had before. So the margin gets reduced accordingly. However, one thing that we have to remember, again, as energy consultants, I would say here, and I know everybody's not an energy consultant here, but the energy consultant is the messenger as to how you're using your energy budget, the same way your cost consultant is the messenger as to how you're spending your money. They are not making the decisions, and it goes, it's the same for us. So again, that additional education and communication with the construction team and with the client team to say, here's how much spare change you have in your pocket. It's on you to manage it. I will be here. I will tell you, if you do A, it costs you that much. If you do B, it costs you more or less. But or as a whole team together, we will make these decisions together. And again, same speak as before for the submittal, but if we don't have that knowledge transfer and that responsibility transfer, I've done all the model, but this is what I'm giving you at the end of design. We've given you a bit of buffer, decide where we want to use it. Without that, then no matter what construction changes have been made, it will probably come back and hurt you, because somebody later on will say, why did you agree to that early on? And so it's that responsibility transfer and knowledge transfer to say, you know how to do this really well with financial budgets. I need you to do the same with these air leakage and energy budgets. And when you do that, and you keep showing them where you are on the roller coaster every time something happens, and like, here's your trajectory if you take that thing, here's your trajectory if you take that thing, this is where I cannot save you anymore, you know, then we have informed discussions about, you know, which changes are the best one to bring back into construction. Because let's be honest, again, as energy consultants, we have the ability to guide the client and the construction team. We don't know all the ins and outs of how you get everything built and what, procurement impacts for COVID and whatever, right? And so it's on them to manage them, but you have to empower them with the right information to start with. And that, again, takes some time because it's not something that construction teams are used to handling in addition to the normal job they handle, right? Mark,
Well, that's fantastic. Very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. And thanks, Josh. That was a question of mine too. So we are totally aligned here. Maureen, I have a question for you. You mentioned that the entire team is responsible for maintaining the energy budget. And
yeah,
I'm wondering, do you change your buffer when you work with repeat clients? And how often do you work with repeat clients? And by clients, I mean designers and builders.
Yes, I guess. Normally the buffers shouldn't change as much, but I do agree that when you know the type of client, you know, be it the actual client or, you know, construction teams or different trades or different design teams as well, right? You will somewhat adjust that with experience to, you know, move it a little bit, but roughly the same concept will apply. So what is, I guess, more important to mention is we do sometimes have the luxury of repeat work, which is amazing, right? Because I want to do it the easy way, and repeat work is the easy way. And the joy it gives you out of that is that all the front-loaded design and construction time that you need for education, for knowledge transfer, for responsibility transfer, you get to like fly through that with your friends. And so I think this is like the winning portion because everybody's at the table, everybody knows where we're going. We're all sharing, this is what I need for this design. Everybody says this is what they need, and you get to compromise and find the optimal solution, both at design and construction. And then you just move on from that with, you know, with that approach. So I think that the time saving that you get at every step of the way with that repeat work is more important than fine-tuning ever so slightly the margins to your clients, because it's not exactly that, right?
Maureen, your communication is always, you know, top bar. And so I'm following every time you present, and I agree with Sean and Shannon that this is a must send to teams starting, teams involved, teams struggling, teams finishing, teams.
Yeah.
You know, cookies, candy bars, Gatorades, all these things are interesting. What is a reward system besides open kindness, besides open communication? What is an award system for the buy-in and the potential for this level of success?
Yeah, that's a good question. In all honesty, Mark, I think that we could be so much more creative on that because I think we've barely scratched the surface. Like, you know, the IPD process where some of the, you know, value engineering and like not benefits, but like reduction in cost and design cost, construction costs get then shared across the team. Like this is one way to do it, and I'm yet to see it carried through. Right, in our office, like the Passive House projects don't go through such an intense IPD. Like it's not formalized. It's like the informal version of in-depth collaboration. But the other project that I've seen in our offices go through IPD, they haven't been carried to construction yet. So that reward hasn't been shared. But I think we could do so much more, because I guess at the core, it would be how you write your contract, right? Like your contract and all your specification has to have clear performance requirements, right? So that's step number one, where some of the projects fail already because your clear requirements are not clear. So you're not setting you up, right? You're not setting anybody up for success. Step number two is when you start seeing penalties added. If you don't meet that air tightness of 0.6 air changes per hour at 50 Pascal, then it's on you to fix it until we get there, because I'm asking you to meet that. Well, why don't we also do it the other way? Here is how much benefits you're going to get the better you get, right? On these levers. And I think there's so much more. This is where, you know, I'm not the financial person in there, but I think somebody could get extremely creative and start having more ideas, because you know what? The reward is nice, but at the end of the day, you're also making everybody's life easier. So as much as I'm sharing all this, keep in mind that it's also making my life easier. And if we're all trying to have the largest impact we can have, right? Cheers, Mark. Then we have to do things the easy way, and we have to do more and more and more. So it's not as if it's a win-lose situation, depending on which perspective you're taking. It's a win-win-win situation. It goes so much easier. So I don't know, maybe we get to dump a few ideas in the chat or have a brainstorm with a beer in Denver to say, okay, how far can we stretch to really talk about this? Because there should be a shared reward, right? It's true. Like it's not a small thing. So
It's shared rewards besides enjoying the building. Maureen, this is fantastic. Whatever we come up with in Denver, we're going to forward to you for some more light reading on a wonderful Saturday. And Shannon, you got 2 more questions.
Thanks, Mark. And I think everybody that's going to Denver should look for an event called Shared Rewards. We are all meeting for a beer in person. We're going to figure this out. There's a lot of great ways to reward people. And I know I like carrots better than sticks. So Jamie is next with his question. Jamie, would you like to unmute?
Yeah, thanks, Maureen. That was great. Just have a question about, I'm sure you've been in situations where your kind of back is against the wall with something that happens during construction, and you're looking for levers to pull to sort of correct the energy model. I'm wondering what's your kind of most creative solution, you know, updating a climate file, putting in negative thermal bridges, looking for, I don't know, some weird air film to bump up your insulation or something. If you have things that you've really had to scratch your head and look for a solution.
Well, luckily enough, we haven't had to do that, but we're not completely against the finish line. You know, like all these buildings are, most of them are under review by our certifier here today. Yes, there might be a few crumbs hidden here and there through like some of the calculations, but again, this is such like death by 1,000 cuts that I do not want to be there, except if I literally have a gun to my head. You know, like this is not delivering projects successfully. And it's just, you know, costing time and effort, and probably giving high performance building not the best reputation out of like, you know, trying to find, you know, a needle in a haystack at this point. So avoiding this like the plague, I guess, because if you design well, then you should never have to get there. But if you really have to, then I don't know, grab a glass of wine for, you know, a long night ahead. And because the amount of inputs that you have into your model, where, you know, you could find a crumb which is like probably moving your 5th decimal place or something, like nobody has ever gotten enjoyment out of that, I promise you. I see Roberto nodding, and he's like, yes, we're not going there.
Yes.
We are not.
We are not going there. We are about to go out for the day, but we have one last question from Zoe Kaufman. Zoe?
Hey, Zoe.
Hello. Hi, Maureen. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
My question was about how you go about trying to convince your client to use a contract, if you get in at the early stages, if you're lucky to do that, how you convince your client to select a contractor who is either experienced in passive house or wants to do all the certification with the crew, because that it seems very tempting for most developers to just select the lowest bid, which is generally the non-experienced contractor, at least in my experience.
Yeah, tough question. I guess that might be a slightly cheeky approach, but I think I let the contractors do the talking. So show up to the interviews, ask the right question about how they manage their energy budget on site, what type of airtightness performance they've delivered on other projects, and how, most importantly, I would say, Zoe, is that it doesn't matter if you've done it before or not. It matters what your mindset is. And if you're able to adapt your current processes to enhance them and meet what we have to do. Because passive house, you have enough experienced people around the table. If you've picked the right team, that can be transferred easily. But you need an open mind on the other side for it to stick. And so you show up to the interviews, you ask a few questions, and then you let the answer between different contractors shine, so that when you debrief, it's just blatantly clear to the developer what they're getting for each. And it's not apples to apples.
I've never been on one of those interviews, but that would be great.
It's fun.
Well, there we go, Shannon. I think we're complete with the queue and we're over the final 15. So we should probably wrap things up. And, we came today to learn about Passive House and have a cup of coffee. And I'm pretty much finished my coffee. So I think we've done our job today. And a call to action, whoever is still here, to take this video when it's published in a few days, send it to your Passive House team, people that are in your Passive House, because the language that Maureen showcased here is amazing. I will actually watch it again because there's a few tidbits that I made notes on, but I want to go back because the way you communicated with some of the language, and it's really interesting about the levers and how we can use those, and how Passive House consultants are really kind of fine tuning those levers. And I know, me being in the builder side, the air barrier, air tightness lever is something that we don't like to play with, but it definitely gets squished. And when you need those extra points to ensure that the metrics all hit, it definitely comes down to having a solid team. So amazing presentation. Shannon, Zach, Kim, I'll let you guys tick it off. But remember, tomorrow is live from Denver, as we have the not hybrid, but the online version of the conference. And then we have Kevin next week. So make sure you've got all that stuff in your agendas and your calendars. And I'll let the rest of the Accelerator team wrap things up. But amazing stuff, Maureen. Love you so much. Appreciate it.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me. And I'll see most of you in person in Denver. Okay.
Yep. Thanks, Maureen. And we'll see you online tomorrow and in Denver in 1 week. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you.